Welcome back to Unmuted Nation. And on today's segment of the Cabinet, I've got two educators joining me to talk a little bit about schools reopening, what's happened with COVID-19 so far, and what parents should do and how we should kind of think about education in general going forward. So without delaying that, first I've got Anastasia Johnson with me and John Goodwin. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Well. Good. So before I look to give listeners and viewers some background just about who's joining the conversation today. So before we get and kind of dive deep into like how we've all been shell-shocked a little bit, Anastasia, just tell me a little bit about you and where you're from and your educational journey.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm Anastasia Johnson. Presently, I am the assistant principal at a charter school in Atlanta, Georgia. I got into education from a justice standpoint because I believe that all children deserve a high quality education. I know what it means for them in terms of breaking generational poverty and making sure they have access to everything that they need to thrive in life. I am entering my 10th year as an educator, and I am very excited about this conversation.
Actually.
Say again?
I said me too, actually.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this conversation because of the passion that I have. Went to Spelman for undergrad, got my master's in education leadership, focusing specifically on charter schools. Started my doctorate last year. And so I am true to education. I plan on doing it my entire life. And I'm particularly focused on scholars that are in urban areas or that are facing the education opportunity gap right now.
Okay, very cool. And John, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Washington, D.C. Came here for school at Clark Atlanta University, where I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts in Educational Studies. And I am continuing at Clark Atlanta, getting my master's in teaching secondary education and mathematics. I also taught at a school here in the Atlanta area. What brought me to education was my 6th grade math teacher. And she really not only poured into us, math, fractions and equations and things like that, but she also poured in nuggets of wisdom and how to be game changers, not only inside the classroom, but outside of the classroom in our communities. And when she would just give us nuggets of wisdom, it just immediately dragged me into education. And every job that I've had, it's been in education from preschool all the way to 12th grade. So it has been a passion of mine. I am a legacy educator because I have educators in my family on my dad's side. Practically all of my aunties are educators. So it's interesting that I'm the only male educator in my family. So it just really feels really good to give back and to pour into communities that also poured into me. So my passion for education runs very deep.
So it's deep. From what I've gathered, both of you are very passionate about it. So I think that adds to the depth of this conversation because I think, and I don't know, I know in different professions, people end up in the professions, they either find out that they really like it or there's something about it that they're just not here for. But sometimes people stick with it when they're not passionate. So it sounds like both of you are both really passionate about the profession and education in general. As Black educators, and I like to go here just because the demographic of the people that listens to the show is really Black, and I really do this for Black people. Black and brown people really, but Black people, I'm Black, so that's what really matters. And I think in this context, there's so many generalizations, and I understand it's the United States, we are a melting pot, but still, in the society we live in right now, there are still disparities between Black, brown, and everybody else, and there's differences in accessibility, differences in feasibility, and so talk to me about just a little bit, Anastasia, we can start with you, just about what you've seen, and even just some basic differences that the common person wouldn't really recognize or even think about, that you kind of see within the education system today between Black and brown kids and everyone else.
Yeah, well, Alex, I think the first thing we have to think about is, well, everybody knows that there is disparity. Everybody knows that there is an opportunity gap. But what we have to understand is why that is. And the reason for that opportunity gap is funding. It is because education in large part is funded by property taxes. And so in Atlanta, for example, if I live in Alpharetta, my home is worth a lot more money than if I live on the south side of Atlanta. And if funding for schools is disseminated in large part by that property taxes, it's going to create a huge gap in the amount of money that a school in one zip code versus another zip code gets. Now, the government has tried to mitigate that by, Title I policies and stuff like that, but it doesn't always close that gap. So what you begin to see is pay gaps for teachers. Okay, teachers in certain areas often get paid less than teachers in other areas, and that impacts the quality of teacher that you get. Now, this is what I'm not saying. I'm not saying teachers in certain areas are less qualified, but if a school, like as a principal, if I have $40,000 as a budget for a teacher, that's going to limit my ability to capture the best candidate. It just is, right?
That makes a lot of sense, which I never really thought about it outside of the teacher's salary, and then maybe what the school may have like budgeted for certain expenses. But if the budgets in general, if the expense budget is you said 40,000, but if it's less than that, and then in really affluent areas, the expense budget is 250,000, then you see that disparity and how it affects things immediately. So have you been in, with that, how do teachers usually cope with those disparities if they are in, I guess, marginalized or lower income areas?
This is where Black and brown teachers begin to really shine, and we see what my brother was talking about, the investment. I have, and I'm sure you have, and every Black and brown teacher that I know has come out of their own limited finances to invest in their kids to make sure that their kids have what they need, point blank, period. I don't know a single educator that has not taken money out of their own home, from their own livelihood, from their own children, to make sure that the kids in their classroom have the resources that they need. I don't know a single one.
So, John, in your experiences, and I guess in the district that you work in, do you see this same type of?
Absolutely. And my sister was definitely right. There has been times when I've come out of my own pocket for my scholars, because I truly believe that once you come through the door of my classroom, you're my responsibility. And since you're my responsibility, I'm going to make sure that you have everything that you need to be successful inside of the classroom. If that means I need to go get some pencils, if I need to go get paper, if I need to go get erasers, scissors, anything that you may need, I'm going to do that, because we're not the type of educators that are just going to sit on the sideline and allow scholars to just struggle, and we have access to resources. Even though we have to go into our own pockets, we're making an investment in a kid, because they may not receive that at home. At school may be the only place of where they feel welcome, of where they feel as if someone cares about them enough that they will take money out of their own account and invest it into their own lives. And that's what I've had to do.
I think it's really, really, I guess it's eye-opening and interesting, because I've heard it, teachers come out of their pockets, but I really don't think, especially as someone that doesn't have kids, and I think even for people that have kids, they just make assumptions that the school is going to cover everything, and that the teachers aren't coming out of pocket for something as minuscule as pencils. And I don't think that the average person even knows that teachers are coming out of their pockets when there is a lack of supplies for a student or a lack of supplies for their classrooms. So in those situations, I mean, obviously, are there ever like reimbursements for the things that you can get, or are there limitations there, or are you, because I think about, like, you know, I've worked in a lot of different industries, and often a lot of things come out of the expense budget. I can't think of anything that I haven't charged back to a company. So do you guys ever face caps with that? Like things that you can't, or that you just don't because you know the money's not there?
Well, at my school in particular, we have worked extremely hard to ensure that our teachers don't have to do that to a certain degree. So every year we give them between $50 to $100 at the beginning of the school year to get whatever they need for the classroom. In addition to that, we provide them with bins that we know, full of supplies that we know that they're going to use. And we do that a couple of times a year. So things like John was saying, pencils, erasers, markers, tape, scissors, all of those things, we give those to the teachers, not because it's a gift, but because it's essential for the work that they do. Like I said, in addition to that, we give them, it depends on the year, $50 to $100 at the beginning of the school year to get whatever else that they want. And we want to invest in our educators. And so we allot an additional $1,000 every year per educator to go towards their education. So let's say they want to go to a conference or they want to get their master's. Obviously, $1,000 is not going to cover the whole degree, but it will support them with books and things like that. Now, I'm the assistant principal. Our executive director has worked tirelessly writing grants to get that money for us because the federal government and the local government does not provide it. And so we have had to forge partnerships with churches and community organizations, with parents and all of the stakeholders in the community to provide just the basics of what our teachers and what our scholars need.
And I want to add to that. It's interesting because Anastasia is the assistant principal at the middle school, and I am the fifth grade math teacher at the elementary school. We work at the same school.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yes, we work at the same school.
It's a teacher family reunion.
It is.
So she's the assistant principal at our middle school, and I am the fifth grade math teacher, the founding fifth grade math teacher at our elementary school. And definitely, the school that we work for really gives and pours out to the community. You know, we come out of our pocket, they also make sure that we're also being educated as well. Because as an educator, you never stop learning. You never stop learning. And with coming out of pocket, you know, I look at that, you know, it's just like, you know, $2, $3, $4. You know, that's an investment. And I look at it when I give scholars things that they didn't even ask for, you know, a certain glow comes on their face. Wow, you know, someone actually believes that I matter in the classroom, and they also look like me. So it makes a big difference when the saying it takes a village to raise a child, and that village isn't just only family, but it's also their school communities. So throughout this time, it has been such a blessing and an honor to serve scholars in the community. And I remember being one of those scholars in a low-income community and still getting that love, getting those resources poured into me, even though my family didn't have the money at the time. So sure. It's a great thing to have that wheel come around where I'm in the position to be a blessing. You know, it's mandatory.
I want to hit on just something that you said, that it's great that the smile that you see, or the shock that you see on their faces when you give them something, or you're able to offer them something or bless them with something, and then the fact that it's someone that looks like them. I think that's another key piece that I'll definitely speak to personally, because I think there was a question, like it was just viral on Twitter over the last week. And the question was, when do you remember when you had your first Black teacher. For me, I didn't have my first Black teacher until I was in 6th grade. It was my 6th grade math teacher. Up until then, I like, my grandmother was a teacher, but that was always in the back of my mind. But based on my experience, it was just like, I just don't see me ever. I didn't have another Black teacher until 10th grade. And it was actually a substitute. I had a teacher that went out on maternity leave. I had a substitute, and then I had a Spanish teacher that was Black in 11th grade. Those were my only 3 Black teachers in 13 years of school. And I think what I learned, and I've been vocal about this, and I think I'm vocal about it just, and this is obviously my opinion and my perspective just based on my own lived experience. I think parents always try, and they try to do their best, most of them. And I want to believe that. I try to believe that. Most parents just want to do their best. And so they have their kids in schools that they think are the best. And even in our community, sometimes, I'm not going to sidebar the conversation, but sometimes we go to other areas where the teachers don't look anything like our kids, and we assume that they have their best interests at heart. As somebody that was very analytical as a child, I found very quickly, and I started to discover in my high school years, that these people really, aside from those of us that were playing sports or being an asset to the school in some way, the teachers really didn't give a damn unless they knew that you had the abilities. And I'll minimize it to this. Like, my family did well. And so I grew up, I didn't really grow up in a low income area. And my mom was always focused on our education. So the moment she saw me slipping, she would get a tutor and things like that. If she was getting frustrated with me, because she's really smart, but she was getting frustrated with me, she would get a tutor. And I just remember, like, it would take twice that she would be frustrated, and then she's like, you know what, I'm getting a tutor. And that's customary for a lot of families in other cultures. They have the ability and the access to get that. And in these affluent areas, the teachers already know that. So and I started to notice it, and my problem is I've been too vocal my whole life. That's always been a problem. But I started to see, my teachers, if like my grades were slipping, oh, Alex, you'll be fine. But I had Black kids that were in my classes that were there, transfers and things like that. And they would just be like, well, you're failing and you're going to fail. And it's just like, there was no, and I could literally see down to, it's a story I tell often. On my graduation day, there was a guy, we were in graduation rehearsal, and a teacher came down, and I just felt like this was petty of her at the graduation rehearsal. She's like, I'm not going to say his name, but she's basically waving the test in the air. You didn't pass this test, and if you want to walk. And she embarrassed him at graduation practice, pulled him and had him take the test. Okay. And I'm like, if you had even cared about his success during the semester, that would have never happened. And that's and my viewpoint, I've been very vocal to, because I don't have children, and people are like, and my siblings included, I want to get my kids in the right schools, get them in schools where people are going to care about them. And it's not always just the people that look like you that care about you, but my point is, your kids have to be in a place that educators care. Right. And from what I'm gathering, just like from our conversation, you guys are in a position that you really kind of care. And I think passion adds to that. Like, if you're doing a job that you care about, you're going to be passionate about your connection with those kids. And for parents that are noticing that, maybe your kid's struggling, and we're going to talk about how, COVID affected all of this. Your kid is having a rough time, and you are frustrated with them. You're frustrated with the teacher. Find out if there's even a connection there. Is the teacher invested in this child's life at all? And I know I feel like it's a lot to ask, because I know that there's a lot of pull on teachers, and I'm not saying that, the buck stops with the teacher, but I just think that's a really important component. And I'm excited for us to be able to actually jump into this conversation with the number of, and since you guys are at the same school, really had no clue. I never met John before, so Anastasia, I've known for a long time. Yeah. And when all of this started to unravel, because I talked to a teacher like maybe a week after things started to develop, I think we were all, depending on, no matter where you were in the country, you were all kind of blindsided when everything started to unfold. I was following COVID-19 because I follow the news and I work for a news organization also. So when it started to unravel in China, and like we're getting reports from press overseas, and I'm seeing it, and things that Americans aren't seeing. It's not on our news yet. It's not here. I live in New York, and we ended up our governor had a press conference early in January. Like, it's not a matter of if it's going to come to New York, but when. So we started hearing it before things started to shut down. And I remember in February, I had some friends visit, and we were already like covering our faces on the trains, but it wasn't enough for us not to be interacting with each other, no distancing, but just very like cognizant that there's something that is probably here already. We don't really know. And then all of a sudden we hit March, and then it's been this Friday will make 13 weeks that it's now me here in this house. So when it hit for you guys, walk me through just the reaction from, I guess, a teacher and an administrator. Like, this is here. It's not safe. We need to shift. John, let's start. Like, just what was what did you feel at that moment?
When we first got the message that we'll be doing remote learning due to COVID-19, it was kind of like, it was mind blowing. It was like, wow, I have to really teach from my living room. Literally, as you can see, teach from my living room, teach from a computer screen. And when I would do these sessions during the digital learning time, my mind wasn't necessarily on the scholars that were on the Google Meet. It was on those scholars that I hadn't heard from. And those who, may be suffering some type of abuse, some type of domestic violence. And I thought about those scholars whose parents were affected by COVID-19, who have COVID-19. And just think about those parents who aren't essential workers, because most of the parents at our school are essential workers. So when we first moved to digital, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work. I'm trying to figure out how can I make, learning, even more interactive, more meaningful. Right. And I want to make sure I reach everybody. But my mind was just on those scholars that I had not seen, until, this past Friday when we did our drive-through graduation. There was some I had not seen or heard, from. So it was very nerve-wracking. It was very confusing. It was just like a blur. But with the help of my other colleagues, with the help of my administrators, it made it a lot easier. It made it a lot easier for me as a teacher to know that I have a village behind me. I had, check-ins every week with my team and my administration, made sure that we had everything that we needed. If there were any scholars that weren't participating. So with the school that I am at now, it made it so easy to get through this time. It was very difficult, but it was very easy to get through because we had a village, and we still do have a village.
I can't imagine what it was like for teachers that didn't have that support system. I hadn't thought of, obviously I thought of teachers that kids that did not have connectivity or access or a way, or maybe they had family issues going on, but I hadn't even thought about parents that may have contracted COVID-19 and them having those students in the home and how that could affect the entire process. So I can't even imagine. Anastasia, when you were probably a part of I assume you're part of the preparation and communication, like to the teams and to the parents, and on the flip side, how were parents reacting? That's the two questions I have for you. Like, how did you guys prepare? How did you deal with parents that were like, because I'm sure the knee-jerk reaction from some of them when they didn't realize that it wasn't just happening at your school, but this is a global thing.
Yeah.
We're experiencing an event and your child cannot come here. Well, what were some of those experiences like?
Well, I remember on March the 12th, that was our last day at school. And the first case of a teacher getting COVID-19 was in a Fulton County school that is a pipeline school for ours. So although it wasn't at our school, we have scholars whose siblings go to those schools and who we will be sending to those schools this year. The sixth graders are going to some of those schools.
Wow.
I mean, the 8th graders are going to some of those schools this upcoming school year. And so I think the overwhelming emotion that we were getting from parents, teachers, all the stakeholders was concern, deep concern, like for their safety.
I mean, I can imagine because I think we had already like halted a lot of work operations in New York by March 12th, but the schools were still open.
Yeah.
And the messaging here was there were 1.2 million kids in school. We cannot close these schools because their parents drive trains,
right,
buses, ambulances, and with 75% of those kids, and these are just the stats that I knew from up here, 75% of those kids were eating at least two meals, some 3 at school every day. And that was the main reason that they didn't want to close. So they weren't closing. And then that Sunday morning, they still weren't closing. Suddenly, I got a press release at 11 a.m. New York public schools will be closed indefinitely. And at 4 p.m., they made the announcement. And I think that's when we were already shut down in so many ways. But I think the city just like everybody threw up their hands and was like, this is what we do at this point.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was a concern. Of course, we're having conversations as the leadership team. We knew that we weren't coming back, but we were trying to figure out how that would be feasible because we have kids that have connectivity issues. The school that John and I work at, we are blessed to be a one-to-one school, meaning that all of our scholars have Chromebooks and laptops, but they use them at school. They don't take them home. And so we were trying to figure out what we can do to make sure that our kids had the technology that was needed, to make sure that kids had the food that was needed. In addition to that, we had to mobilize our counselors to open up office hours for kids that were experiencing anxiety. It's not every kid in the urban area is facing some type of abuse and neglect.
No, of course not.
You know what I mean? In addition to that, our school is very mixed income, actually. We have kids whose parents are well-off entertainers, and we have kids whose parents are not. We'll just put it like that. Okay. And so just meeting the needs of every scholar was essential. And from an administrative standpoint, my primary concern always is teachers, because if I take care of my teachers, they're going to take care of the children. And so my concern was, how do I make sure that my teachers have what they need, that they feel supported, not only in terms of their profession, but as people, because their lives matter, for lack of a better word. And so we had to make a decision very quickly. I remember my principal sent me a text on like March the 12th and was like, hey, can you go ahead and design like our digital learning system? I was like, yeah, sure. When do you need it? I need it tomorrow. Like, what do you mean tomorrow?
I don't know that that's gonna happen, but sure.
So I worked all night, and obviously I just used the resources that everybody is using now, Google, Meets and Zoom and all that stuff. But to put it together, our school had been using like digital platforms, but they were like the side dishes. You know what I mean? So we had to overnight convert side dishes to the main course. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that I want to acknowledge teachers and parents and students and administrators all over this country, because we had to pivot quickly. And some people view this change as an interruption, as if, oh, we're just pausing, but it's not an interruption. This is a disruption in education, probably permanently. And
Right,
so
it's a disruption and definitely a change. And I
mhm.
think I'm gonna put a pause in it right there because
Yeah.
we're gonna keep talking about this. I think that overall, I think a lot of people are just stunned, and for almost decades now that we've had technology and accessibility to do things, people have shunned it and said no. And now there was not just a need, but a requirement that this is a change that we have to make. So I think a lot of people are trying to cope with that. And some, people will always reach, but I want to talk a little bit just about how that changed things for you guys and your projections for, that we have a lot of speculation of what is to come, but nobody knows for sure. I really want to kind of expand the conversation now and talk about you guys were able to make the pivot, you were able to make the shift. Worked with the parents, worked with the teachers, worked with the students. Before I jump into this next conversation, what is the morale of the students like? How are they feeling?
I would say that the students are missing each other. They are missing us. They are missing administrators. They miss being in an actual school environment. They realize that being at home all day, every day, you really can't go anywhere. They really value school at this point. Even when I'm teaching on the Google Meet, they take time to just interact with each other,
Sure.
with each other, to see how they're doing, see how their family's doing. It's just a wonderful thing to see that. The students, they miss being, outside. They miss being in the school, and we miss them. We miss them more than they'll ever realize.
No, I can imagine, and it's not like this is not an extended vacation. This
Right.
was
Right.
it is like them, their siblings, their parents. Like, okay, I need something else, and it's in this sense, they have a life as well. Something that they would love. It's a huge disruption. This is not just pizza and sleepovers, indefinitely. So, I just think that the resilience of the teachers and the staff and the people that are working in these schools, kudos to you, because I think that it's people aren't even realizing how difficult the task is. And I'm seeing obviously on social media, but these kids need to go back to school, these kids. And I'm like, some of these parents are realizing that your kid is not what the teachers have been saying about Lil Johnny for the last 5 years. This is the real Lil Johnny. Now Lil Johnny, and he's been bad as hell. Now he's at
Right.
Robinson Homeschool, and you know just how bad Lil Johnny is. So I think it's a wake up call, like it has been for tons of adults as well. So some schools are already planning or they're in the midst of planning how to return. I know schools in the South, they go back much sooner than schools traditionally up here in the Northeast. So I know like when I moved up here, I was confused because these buses were out here and the kids got backpacks and it's June. And I'm like, what's going on? We get out at the end of June. I'm like, I don't know that life. So I know down South, some of the districts started going back as early as July. And I think that's just too much, but whatever. It's closer than we think. Like it's closer.
Yeah.
Have you guys started in your schools, and then we'll talk about a wider perspective here. Have you guys started planning for the fall and what that may look like? Are there different scenarios that may play out, or is it like based on data? I'm hoping I don't want to infringe. I'm hoping it's not based on politics. But hopefully it's based on scientific data and factual data that we have, because we still don't know too much about this disease. But now we know that we are now seeing it in kids, and it's manifesting in a different way, and they're calling it a mysterious illness. And it's what's not mysterious is that it's taking people out. Yeah. So when you guys come back in the fall, what is that going to look like?
We don't know. We don't know. That's just the truth. We have at our school 4 different scenarios that we are toying with. Now, the CDC just released these guidelines a couple days ago, and that changed everything. So we were already considering like 4 different scenarios. One of which being, we don't come back until January. We were toying with kind of splitting the days half and half. Have some kids come in the morning, some kids have come in the afternoon. We were toying with a blended model where maybe a couple days a week we do in person, a couple days a week we do blended. There are like several different scenarios that we are talking through. Now, we were making those plans before the CDC released these recommendations. That has changed everything because
I even saw one of the CDC recommendations was staggering the arrival times of the
Yeah.
kids. And my first thought there is, so do you have teachers that you can stagger as well? And how are you going to go from like an 8-9 hour school day to a 14? Who's doing that? How is that managed?
Exactly.
And you know, the operational costs that right now everybody's budget is stretched. So now the building's is operational for more out. Like my mind went to economics immediately. So
Exactly.
how is that even a thing?
Well, I mean, some of these scenarios lend itself to less money because you're taking out transportation, you're taking out food services. Some of these scenarios lend themselves to an extreme increase in cost because you're asking teachers to work more hours, or you're having to hire more staff so that you can have smaller classroom sizes. And with the multi-billion-dollar budget cut that Georgia in particular just underwent, it's just not possible to either hire more staff or give the compensation that teachers deserve for asking them to work like 10, 11, 12-hour days. They already work, most teachers already work 10, 11, 12-hour days, even if they're working from home.
At this point, it's like the chickens are really coming home to roost because we've been talking about teachers and their compensation for years. Yeah. Now you need teachers essentially to do more, and you want to ask them to do it for less. And I believe many of them are so passionate about it, they will. But how do we shift this? Like, I think the policy, a lot of the things that we're talking about when it comes to voting for our elected officials and things, we are talking about the wrong things.
Yeah.
And things that essentially are not really affecting the future. And I think these are the types of things that have to be brought to the forefront. That's a whole nother conversation I'll invite y'all back to have
Alex,
another day.
Something else we have to consider as well is that I think one of the things that I try to get away from as an administrator is there are certain things that teachers are unfairly expected to do. For example, good teachers buy their students what they need. Like, why are we expecting teachers to do that? Why is that something that is like a requirement? And if you're unwilling or unable, there's like a stigma on you, like that you're not a good teacher, right? Or teachers are expected to work these extra long hours. Teachers are expected to pick kids up on the weekends. Like, of course, we want teachers to be invested, but there is no other profession anywhere where the level of like personal sacrifice that teachers are just expected to make is like a mandate. So what about I just had a baby 5 weeks ago, right? And if teachers have families, they have mothers, they have fathers, they have children, they have spouses. So the expectation, just have them work 14 hours a day. Well, what about their children? What about their livelihood? I mean, not livelihood. What about their mental health? What about their physical health? So some of the policies and the scenarios that we're toying with, they just are not sustainable for. I think we forget that teachers aren't just professionals, but they're people.
Yes.
Right? They're just not sustainable for human beings.
I want to respond to that. I'm going to respond to teachers being people. John, how are our parents already contacting you? Just a little anxious about the fall?
Oh, definitely. They have been reaching out to me throughout this entire period.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out, what to do, how to do it, because most of our parents, they work from home. Most of my parents work from home. And limited resources when it came to internet. So they reached out, how do I do X, Y, and Z? How do I do A, B, and C? And I had to create different ways on different how-tos so that parents can help the children, because not only have the parents become, the person that does the cooking and the laundry, but they're their teachers. And I've always believed that a parent is a child's first teacher.
Yeah.
And now that has really been put into place because they're teaching ELA, they're teaching math, they're teaching science, they're teaching history. And they have to review, because some of them, it's been a minute since they've been in school. So they have to go back to.
Oh, I know their parents. Some of them weren't checked in when they were in school. So
Right. So it's been such a journey with the parents. And the thing that parents really appreciate is the fact that teachers are actually being responsive to their messages. Whenever they email me, whatever they message me on Class Dojo or anything like that, I always respond. You always want to keep that communication strong. And, especially at our school, we always say, always respond within 24 hours.
Yep.
But especially during this time, we want to respond immediately.
Yep.
Because
I think that parents are finding out that teachers are human and people, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I often say that, I didn't realize that teachers were people when I was in school. They may say that they have families and kids and all of that, but I'm like, no, you're a teacher. That's my whole. And now I have friends that. I have friends that are teachers. I have friends that are administrators, it's insane. But I know now that these people are in fact humans. And I sometimes think, very adult conversation at this point. Were my teachers, because I think this is again another conversation for another day. I think. When I think about my friends and what me and my friends do, and then I realize that they are teachers at times, I think back to my teachers and I'm like, there is just no way. Because at that time, it wasn't that long ago, but I feel like they just all shopped at the same place. They had the same vest. There was a look to a teacher. Teachers don't have a look anymore. I don't think and society has changed in general, right? We were just Black community. We were looking at Nelly and Ludacris last week, 42 and 45. Things have changed because when I remember 45, I'm like, oh, that's old. that's old. And now that I'm getting closer to that, I don't feel that way anymore. So maybe my perspective has changed, but I think parents are now getting a different respect for teachers. For teachers, because they now know that wow, they actually are dealing with a lot. And for parents that have multiple kids, I can't imagine how stressful it is. The CDC has released some really, really, I'm going to call them ridiculous guidelines and recommendations for reopening. Ridiculous. As educators, and I also think that as we talked about, it's not good for adults, not to have human interaction right now with everything that's going on.
Right.
So some of these recommendations, students should not eat in cafeterias. They should eat in classrooms, no playgrounds. And I know that we've already taken a lot of recreational activities away from kids, and we have a very obese country. And maybe the fish rots from the head. The president-in-chief is morbidly obese, so that's part of that. But I think I don't understand. I saw one guideline that students should sit alone on school buses, one per seat, and then a seat in between each kid. And a friend of mine that is he works over the buses, I think, for Atlanta Public Schools, was telling me it would take. With those guidelines, it would take 158 buses for one school. So some of this is just not feasible.
Right.
The kids you were mentioning earlier when we were talking that there's supplies for the classroom, markers and things. And the recommendations are that every kid has their own markers and their own everything. And what is the feasibility of any of this?
Alex, it's not feasible. Let's cut to the stage. It's not feasible. And what I believe is that the CDC, I'm not working at the CDC. You told me that I could speak boldly, just tell my opinion. That's my opinion. My opinion is the CDC knows that school is not open. But rather than saying, don't open, y'all, they release this litany of recommendations that they know no school can follow. I'm a middle school educator right now, but I started in pre-K and elementary. There's no way that a kindergarten or a pre-K baby, oh my goodness, is going to walk around with a mask on his or her face. They're already experiencing school for the first time with all of the joy and the anxiety that's attached to that. And you expect this little bitty baby to walk around with the mask on, not eating with their friends, facing the same way. One thing that is important is like collaborative learning and cooperation. So you want kids to not only not be able to eat with one another, but they can't be with one another in the hallway. For a middle school and high school, that's one of the times when you want to kind of turn up a little bit. In the classroom, you have to focus on whatever the teacher is saying and doing. You have to be focused. In the hallway, that's your opportunity to run, slap somebody in the head, talk to your friends real quick, get a drink of water, use the restroom, and then get back to it. And you're taking that away from kids, not only their ability to have free time in the cafeteria, but you're taking away experiential learning. One thing that we do with our kids every year is we take them on overnight trips. We're gone for 2 or 3 days at a time to give them an opportunity to experience learning and make those connections to what they have been learning in the classroom. We can't do that anymore. Now, I don't think the CDC is trying to be ridiculous. I think that what they're saying is actually what it's going to take to keep scholars healthy, but it's just not possible to do. It's not sustainable financially. It's not sustainable relationally. It's not sustainable academically.
You're right. It's just not. John, your thoughts?
It's just crazy, to even think about, having the kids be so isolated, and to feel as if they are still at home, but in a school environment. It just makes no sense to me. And I'm a 5th grade teacher. So my 5th graders, they love being with each other. They love interacting with each other, even in the hallways when they're supposed to be in a line and silent, they still talk to each other. So, and even at recess, that's the time where they get to, converse and to hang out and play, and also in the cafeteria while they get to eat together. And the fact that you want them to bring their own food, and usually what we do at the beginning of the school year, most parents bring stuff for their scholars, bring supplies for their scholars. So we've had that process implemented before the CDC, recommends that each scholar brings their own materials. We've already had that in place. But what about those scholars that could not afford it? What about those scholars that just cannot even, their lives at home is just so corrupt that the only place they had peace was at school, being around other scholars around their age. And I just think the CDC guidelines, at the end of the day, they should tell us just remain at home, keep the schools closed.
Yeah. And that's really what I was getting at. I think my question is it going to be better for these kids to be at home with access to their teachers, interaction with their friends and their classmates via whatever the medium, and limited interactions? I think the goal of the government should be make things safe. Okay.
Yes.
So tell us, and this is what I want. Tell us the truth. A, there's a huge problem with that. But B, we know a logical person can tell you that we can't do any mass gatherings until there is some type of immunity or cure or full healing in this land. So until that happens, we are not going to. It's not, and I'll say it this way. And I echo the sentiments of a lot of people. Our preacher this week said it the best, but a lot of people have been saying it the same thing. When these government buildings open, before you open a school, open the governor's mansion, open the Capitol.
Yes.
You can't go to the Capitol right now. You can't go to the White House. You can't go to your governor's mansion. And all of these three things we pay for with our taxes, our money, is keeping them alive and keeping them open. So for what reason would we send children that are now being and economy fine? Everyone, American economy. There is no economy with no people.
Right. I think the thing we have to consider, Alex, as well, is teaching is already difficult, right? Just to make sure that the kids, teaching is one thing, but learning is something else, right?
Yeah.
So no matter what the teachers are doing, we have to make sure that their behavior is actually leading the scholars towards learning. Now, what happens when a part of being an educator is managing scholar behavior, right? That's a part of it. It's not the funnest part, but it is a part of it. So what happens when all day, every day, a teacher, put your mask on, separate, why are you sharing pencils? Like that's going to take away from the actual.
Well, and one of the other things that I saw there is recommending that the kids, no matter the grade, stay with the teacher all day.
It's not possible.
My understanding is some of these teachers, after, is it 5th or 6th grade, these teachers aren't qualified to teach these kids these subjects all day.
Yep.
So, I don't know. And this goes back to another argument. Like I said, I got plenty of arguments for every day of the week. Things are very regional. And I do understand that, like, things are, if you grew up, in, somewhere in South Dakota and you grew up there, you're going to work there, you're going to live there, you have no plans of leaving, that type of training may work for you in whatever you're going to do. But for the wide scope of people, this is just not a logical or feasible option. So I actually agree with you, and I think that this is them saying don't open without saying don't open. Yeah. And since they've been muzzled in so many ways, I just want to keep, if you guys are open to it, I want to keep talking to you about this and what's happening in education, because it's a conversation that we are going to have. And then usually these are conversations in my space that we put on pause until, late July, August, until things are about to ramp back up. But this is a conversation that we have to continue to have as things continue to develop. And I'm grateful for your perspectives and your thoughts and just encouragement. There's encouragement that you could give. Let's end on that. Encouragement that you could give parents and students in this time. John, what is something that you would say to them?
A piece of advice that I would give to all parents is to never be ashamed to ask for help. Never be ashamed. If you need to reach out to your teachers, reach out. That's what we are here for. I explained it a few weeks ago. I believe school is like customer service. And our parents, our scholars are our customers. If we are not giving them the customer service that we told them that we were going to give them during orientation throughout the school year, they're going to take their business somewhere else. So we have to, keep that open line of communication. And I know we're living in some just crazy times, but just never lose the faith. Things are going to get better. Things are going to get better, in your household. Things are going to get better for the educational system, praying. And it's just, keep the faith, still believe, and hold on. We understand how difficult it is. As a teacher, it is very difficult from going from a school environment to setting up in a living room where I don't have a whiteboard or a smart board. All I have is some anchor charts and a computer. So it's difficult, and just know that administrators, teachers, we're here for you. This is what we do. This is what we get paid for, to be of service to you, our scholars and our families. Never be afraid to reach out for any assistance. If you need some ideas on work during the summer, how to, keep that summer learning loss, down because they've been out of school since March. And we're talking about going back to school in August. We're talking about months without actual instruction. And usually during the summer, those students usually have that summer learning loss where they kind of have not been continuing that instruction throughout the summer. So I would say to the parents, to the scholars, reach out to your teachers, to your administrators, and all the educators continue to be of service, but also take care of yourself first. Okay, we always
good advice. Good advice. Keep the faith. Reach out. And take care of yourself. Anastasia, final words of just encouragement for parents and students in this time.
Yeah, I just want to encourage parents. First of all, I want to thank parents. Let's talk about that. We always talk about how parents aren't engaged and aren't doing this and aren't doing that. But it's been my experience that parents are really stepping up and stepping out of their comfort zones to build strong partnerships with schools. And so I just want to say thank you to all of the parents that have been stepping up in that way, communicating with teachers, learning new material for the first time, and even thanking teachers for the work that they've done. I have personally received so much gratitude from parents who are saying, hey, I understand where you're coming from. Thank you for what you're doing to my scholar. So thank you for thanking us. That's number one. And I want to encourage parents to advocate for yourselves. Don't just wait for the district or the school or the government to tell you what's going to happen with your children. Advocate for yourself. Advocate for the safety of your children. Make sure that you're going out and making it clear what you want and what's in the best interest of your kids. And I want to say to the kids, thank you as well. Thank you for turning in your assignments. Thank you for sending emails. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for being engaged in the lessons, because I know that's extremely difficult to do. And we see your hard work. We see your hard work, and we're not giving up on you. To the teachers, I want to say thank you as well for pivoting quickly into this digital world of education, for literally opening up your homes, for holding your baby in one arm and teaching your other babies at the same time, for neglecting time with your spouse so that you can give more to your kids. And we see what you're doing, and we're working extremely hard to make sure that your hard work pays off. To the administrators, to my colleagues, I also want to express gratitude, because we have been forced to lead in a space that we have never been in before. Literally, for the first time, the entire industry, if you will, of education is going in a new direction, and we have that burden on our shoulders for the first time. So I want to speak to all of the administrators, all of the principals, assistant principals, coaches, and say, just keep going, keep thinking, keep innovating, keep learning, keep leading. Your schools are going to be fine. Your teachers are going to be fine. Your parents and your communities are going to be fine. And we're all in this together.
What I do want to do is thank you, John, and thank you, Anastasia, for uplifting both these families and communities. What we do know is that none of us, this is a foreign territory for us all. And so thank you both for uplifting these students and these families, the community and the nation. Without you, none of this would be possible. And so if you guys are open to it, I would love to have you back for these conversations again as things develop, just because it's rough for everybody right now. And we're just going to continue to have the conversation here. Thank you for being a part of the cabinet today.
Thank you.
More Unmuted Nation continues. Stay with us. This riveting conversation continues, and us trying to navigate this unclear space, what's happening in the nation, what's happening in our schools, and what's happening in our communities. We're all a part of that, and it takes each one of us to make a difference. I've got more Unmuted Nation after this. Stay with us.
Unmuted Nation, weekdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on BossFM Talk.